working? It's going to take a little second. There we are. Okay, I think we are now live. So hello everyone and welcome to our Q&A on studying music at Cambridge. We're really sorry not to be able to meet you in person this year at our open days, but we're really looking forward to hearing your questions this afternoon and we'll do our very best to answer them. If you do have any questions, please just leave them in the live chat and we'll work our way through them over the next 45 minutes or so. My name's Delphine Mordy. I'm the Outreach Coordinator here at the Faculty of Music, and I'm also Director of Studies in Music at Newnham College, Churchill College and Wolfson College. I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon by two of my colleagues and one of our final year students who are going to help answer questions this afternoon. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves now, starting with Catherine.
Hello, my name's Catherine Ellis, and some of you may have seen part of the video that I did with Delphine and with Sam Barrett, just talking a little bit about the course, and I'll be very happy to answer further questions that you might have on that subject. I rejoice in the title of 1684 Professor of Music. This basically means that was the year that Cambridge decided it was a really good idea to have a professor of music. And it's just one of those very special years. Of course, the year before, certain very famous composers were born, but Cambridge got there first and gave birth to its professor just in time. So I work on 19th century and early 20th century France. I spend my time buried in archives, thinking about music and gender, music and religion, music and education, and the kinds of repertories that people really fight over in the press and on the concert hall, in the concert hall and on the operatic stage. So I will now pass over to Dr. Sam Barrett to tell you a little bit about himself.
Hello, as Catherine said, I'm Sam Barrett. I'm a lecturer here at the faculty. I have specialisms in areas that look a long way apart. Medieval music and jazz are the two areas that I teach in the faculty. We can maybe get into that later. I'm also Director of Studies at Pembroke College, where I was previously Director of Music. So I have a background, I was an organ scholar, I've been a choral volunteer at the choirs here, and I still carry on that kind of work as well. So I have a range of interests, a range in my teaching and in research, and I'm looking forward to speaking to some of you later.
Hi everyone, my name is Cheryl. I am a ambassador as well as a third-year music student at Robinson College. My academic interests in music are primarily based around film studies, so film music composition and film music theory, in addition to ethnomusicology as well as popular music. Some of the activities that I've been involved in Cambridge include conducting the university's Chinese orchestra, as well as musically directing some of our musical theater productions, as well as singing in my college's chapel choir.
Okay, thanks so much to all of you. So we've had a few questions that were sent in advance, so we can maybe start with those. One of the questions that we get asked quite a lot is about keyboard skills. And how important they are both at interview and as part of the course. I wondered if perhaps Sam, you could start with that.
Okay, keyboard skills. Yes, they are a part of the course and they're there in the first year. They're only a small part of the first year course, nevertheless. And we really use it as a medium through which we can teach you certain things. So we can teach you about an understanding of harmony. We can teach you about how you might handle a melody. We can teach you how to improvise if we're looking at Baroque music, and indeed if you're taking that option within a jazz component, which is also a component of what we teach in the first year alongside keyboard skills. There's an option there for people who are looking to improvise, and we can teach people how to do that. And it can be one of your options within a keyboard skills package. But it's very much a medium through which we can get at your practical understanding and help you to improve that of music, so that your specific fluency at the keyboard is not really the issue so much as how you understand music and how you can improve your understanding of music through the use of the keyboard as a tool.
And I wonder, Cheryl, if you could talk a little bit about your experience of this and whether this is an area that you had a lot of experience in, or how you found that side of the course?
Yeah. So I was a piano player prior to coming to Cambridge. And I will say that it's quite different from what you expect from playing the piano, because a lot of it is actually based on, I guess, what the ABRSM would classify as practical musicianship. So a lot of it is also based on your listening skills, in addition to your score reading skills. So these are all super useful aspects in your everyday analysis about different pieces of music, whether you're a performer, for example, or a composer. It ultimately equips you with these skills that help you become a better musician in general, I think.
Okay, thank you. I appear to be struggling to connect to the live chat here. So I'm going to continue to try to work that out. But while I do, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about the workload that students can expect at Cambridge, particularly the sort of number of contact hours per week, the number of assignments they might be expected to do, and those sorts of questions. Perhaps Cheryl, you might kick off on that.
Yeah. So basically, it's the music tripos, so that it's divided into 3 different years. In every year we get 6 modules, and in the first year we have 6 compulsory modules that are pre-selected, and this covers quite a wide spectrum of Western art music primarily. So this could be anything from what we call History 1, which is centered around Middle Ages, Baroque, Renaissance music. And then we also have History 2, which is centered around music of the classical period, as well as Romantic. We have analysis, keyword skills, and we also have a paper that's in which we understand music in addition to other disciplines. So, for example, sociology or through performance. And I think this has changed. The name of this paper has changed a little bit since when I did it. So I might have to pass over to Catherine or Sam to further discuss this, because I didn't go through this curriculum, so I'm not entirely sure what's happening in that. But the workload, I'd say, is quite similar per year. The difference is what you ultimately study, as well as the areas that you choose to interact with, because you get to specify and choose which modules you want to do as you progress throughout the tripos. So you do get an increased amount of flexibility and independence towards the end of the tripos, where you really get to study what you want to study.
Shall I just add in a few things there? Because yes, the course will be changing, but in terms of workload and the kinds of things that you're doing, I think what I would wish to stress is the variety and the amount of choice. We're actually increasing the amount of choice of the kinds of project work, the kinds of assessment. And therefore, you know, we hope that the new tripos the new degree that we're designing right now is something that is going to engage you in all sorts of different ways, in ways that are really relevant to the real world, as well as ways that are really inside, and then projecting that outside. In terms of just how much work you'll be doing, I think there is a very specific thing about Cambridge, which is that you won't be assessed on absolutely everything that you do. In fact, there's a lot that you will do, which will be work which enables you to take risks, work which enables you to explore different things. Cheryl, I hope this begins to sound like the supervision system, and how students can use the supervision system as a way of flying a kite, flying an intellectual and creative kite, and having a really good conversation with somebody who is an expert, but also somebody who is willing to learn. And so we don't have a culture within Cambridge where you do a piece of work and you're doing it in order to be assessed on it. We have a culture which means you work very hard, yes, but a lot of the work that you're doing is work in which you're able to push that exploratory idea to the full. And this is one of the things that we think is one of the real pleasures and excitements of the Cambridge degree.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm pleased to say that I can now see the live chat again, and we do have some questions coming in. So the first one is, do all music students have pianos in their college rooms? Well, that's one I can answer, I think, that all music students are provided with either a piano or an electric keyboard in their rooms in college. Sometimes the electric keyboard is a preferable option so that you can sort of work on your harmony and counterpoint exercises sort of beyond the music hours without disturbing your neighbours. But yes, so all music students have access to keyboard or piano in their room. Next question we have here is, what tips do you have for preparing to study music at university, particularly with harmony, history, and analysis? So it's with almost everything. Do you want to start with that one, Sam? Oh, Sam, you're muted.
You're muted.
There we are. Okay. Tips for studying. What I normally say, I'll say what I normally say, and I think because it covers most bases here, is that we expect you to, first of all, know your schoolwork well. So you will be submitting materials, you will have experience of what you studied at school. And it is worth knowing that well. But then we're looking for evidence that you as an individual have followed up things that you're interested in. Well, that could be on the basis of your schoolwork, it could be on the basis of things that you've heard, listened to, found out for yourself. So it's that combination of covering the ground of material that you've been taught, but also looking beyond it. Now that can take many, many different forms. And I'm sure my colleagues here will suggest some of those. I would just say two things, and it's less to do with the content and more to do with the way you do it. I would suggest very much that you do the normal things. You read, you listen, you attend events, but that crucially, the next two things are always, I think, the most crucial, that you think about what you've heard, or you think about what you've read for yourself. Try to evaluate it, come to a judgment about it, so you have some kind of critical relation to what you've just seen, what you've just heard, what you've just read. And then the next stage, which I also think is crucial, is that you try to talk to somebody about it, because learning to articulate your thoughts is absolutely crucial, because that's what you're going to be faced with at an interview situation where you'll be asked a question, and many people in that situation, it may be the first time they've been asked directly about their interest by somebody with an academic interest in that. Any chance you have to talk to somebody else about it, to learn to articulate your thoughts, I think is a very helpful stage.
And can I just jump in there to say as well that it's helpful not just in preparing for interview, but also during the degree as well. That's what we do. We spend a lot of time talking to our students in supervisions over the course of the 3 years. And so that it's really, yes, as you talk, it helps you to develop your ideas and to gain in confidence. And that's something that we'll continue to do throughout the degree. Catherine, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I think it's really to riff on what you've both said, which is that, you know, you're going to be taught by geeks. We love what we do. We're really enthusiastic about what we do. And so that curiosity that not only says, yes, I like this, but which goes further and says, well, why? And also, how could this have been better? And if I go onto YouTube and I compare these two performances of this same piece, what am I getting out of them that's different? And what are the approaches that are different? And similarly, you know, if you're working on particular pieces as part of your schoolwork, it would be really fantastic, given how open the internet is and how Google Scholar can lead you in all sorts of interesting ways, just to try and find somebody else's voice on the thing that you've been taught at school. Now, I can imagine if there are any teachers smuggled amongst this audience, they're going to hate what I'm going to say next. But to have conflicting voices and to have to have the tools to begin a discussion that, you know, challenges ideas and which enables you to critique. These are the things that we're looking for, and you can begin to do that on the basis of the schoolwork that you've already done by just thinking about how other people have approached these same ideas and these same pieces of music. And as Sam says, beginning to come to your own view in much the way that Marina's Shostakovich 10 film ended with a huge question mark, laying out the evidence and saying, okay, over to you.
Thank you. Cheryl, as someone who's just come to the end of your degree, looking back, do you have any tips that you would like to pass on to students?
Yeah. So I do very much agree with the point about talking to anyone who will listen to you. And I remember myself being a very demanding and annoying student in high school, because I would just talk about music with anyone who would listen. And even if they didn't want to listen, I still talked about it with to them. So definitely learning how to articulate your thoughts and learning how to put together an argument is going to be super helpful in terms of when you're working or discussing in your supervisions, and also when you're just writing an essay, because when you're writing your essay, you're just basically putting your thoughts onto paper. I think what I also emphasize is the use of multimedia as being a resource for you to sort of broaden your exposure to different types of music. And I think particularly sometimes within the Cambridge course, people are expecting to write a lot or read a lot, and that's definitely true. But it's also worth remembering that music as a subject is interdisciplinary in that, you know, it's also about performance, it's about theater, it's about dance, it's about all these different interrelated disciplines. And so what I usually like to do is to basically, well, click on a clip on YouTube basically and just go down the YouTube rabbit hole and see where, you know, I end up. And I think that's a really good way of broadening your exposure to any type of music that's out there, really.
Hey, thank you. So the next question we have here is the specialism of the Director of Studies in each college important when applying? Should you apply to a college where the fellows there have a similar interest to you? Do you want to take that on, Sam? Unmute yourself, please. Sam, you're still muted.
There we are. Okay. Well, this is an interesting question. I would say this, in one respect, it doesn't matter at all, because every Director of Studies deals with students who have different interests to them. And then, in fact, that's a lot of our students are developing their own interests, and they're finding what's interesting to them. And a lot of our Director of Studies, in fact, if not all of them, have very wide interests, and in fact have good knowledge of a wide varieties of music, and can help their students to explore that as a first stage. With that said, if you think you have a very strong specialism already, then there is a chance, if you end up at a college with a Director of Studies who's interested in that, that you'll have slightly more access to conversations about that topic. I'll just give one example here. I have a few students who come who are interested in jazz, and I talk to them about that. And I think it does help a little bit, because there's simply more chances for me to talk to them about that and to think about how they might want to develop a project in that area, say a dissertation or analysis or whatever. And yes, I think just generally I can help a little bit more. But with that said, I have plenty of students for whom, on the face of it, our interests don't match, but I have a great time learning out about their areas of interest, and they have a great time learning about mine.
Yeah, I think I would just reinforce that. I work on late 19th century France, and actually very few of the students at my colleges specialize or have particular interests in that area. But I work with students from other colleges, and then will ask my colleagues to help students with other specialist interests. So it might be a factor when you're thinking about, it's one of the very many things that you can take into consideration when thinking about which college you want to go to, but it needn't be a determining factor, I think. Okay. Do the opportunities of performances and ensembles vary largely between colleges, and which colleges are most known for studying music? Who wants to take that one on? Perhaps, well, Cheryl, do you want to give the student perspective on that, perhaps?
Yeah. So every college has its own music society. And so there will always be opportunities to participate in music making at your college. And the vast majority will also have opportunities for you to participate in choir or choral singing. The colleges which don't, for colleges which don't, then you would have the opportunity to sing at a neighboring college, or really if you can just apply to a college to ask and see if you can participate in singing with them. In terms of other performance opportunities, I'd say to me, it feels like most of the music making that occurs is university based. So there are all these big university ensembles. You can participate in, for example, in wind orchestra, concert band, string orchestra, for example. And these are all operate on a university-wide level. And I think I'd also like to emphasize here the vast amount of opportunities to participate in music making. It's mind-blowing to me, because for every week you have, I think, a solid 7 or 8 different concerts happening all at the same time. And you just kind of figure out, like, oh my God, which concert do I go to tonight? So really you're spoiled for choice. But also, I also want to emphasize that there's more music making in addition to what we consider, I guess, as Western art music making. So there's also musical theater, there's also jazz bands, and some people form ensembles of their own. So really, it's up to you to decide what you want to do.
Thank you. Do many students who go on to study composition have previous experience outside of courses? So I guess sort of whether you've done much composition before coming to Cambridge. Sam, yes.
Yeah, I've had quite a few students come through interested in composition, and it's been a variety, to be honest with you. I've had students come through who have won competitions before they've come to Cambridge and had an established profile. I've had students who have really done nothing of the type before they turned up here. And by the end of 3 years, it's remarkable how people's interests have developed and changed and broadened through the supervision that we can offer. So I would say there's no one path, certainly through on that composition side. You don't necessarily need to have a background in it before you come. And there's so much opportunity now here under the paths that have been developed by a composer at the faculty, Richard Corsten, but also by lots of composers in the colleges as well, who come up and supervise for courses and who teach for us as well, that there's simply a wide variety of opportunity once you arrive.
I know.
Sorry,
yes, go on.
Sorry, Delphine. I would just add to that the whole point of the design of the first year is to provide a kind of secure foundation, so that while there will be people who have a lot of experience, incoming students who have a lot of experience in various areas that we teach in the first year, the point of the first year is to enable everybody to have access to a kind of platform that enables them to go on into the second year, so that people can develop new specialisms. Some people will come and they'll know exactly which path they want to take, and there'll be other people who come in and who are suddenly blown away by the possibilities of something completely new. And what we try to do with the stream system that we have, the different strands of the course, is to enable follow through starting at year 1, and composition is in exactly that same position.
And I know, Cheryl, you compose particularly film music, I think. Right. Is there anything else that you would like to add to that, or any sort of tips or advice on composition at Cambridge?
Yeah, so I did come to Cambridge with some previous experience in composition, and that was mainly only because I did IB Music and I chose to do composition. So I did have a tiny bit of experience before coming here, but it was only when I got here that I realized, there's this totally new world that was called free composition. And I was like, what on earth is that? It was just because I've never been taught composition in that way before. So that was new to me. And also with film composition, that's also something that I slowly began to develop at Cambridge as well. Because I don't think there are particularly many opportunities for film composition at the secondary level. And so really a lot of sort of my current composition interests were cultivated at Cambridge.
Thank you. While we're on composition, we've got another question in here. Do you have a house style for composition, or does anything go? Sam, do you want to have a go at that?
I can't say there's a house style. No, there's certainly not that. And we have such, as Cheryl was mentioning there, film composition. all sorts of 20th century compositional styles are taught through Richard Corson. And then you're getting, of course, pastiche composition as well. So you're learning about 17th, 18th century, 19th century styles as well through your compositional style. We have free composition papers, which are simply open for any compositional style you wish, as well as some classic techniques papers where you learn to write, say, a fugue or another genre of music in imitation of other composers, which is, of course, a standard learning technique down the ages as well. So I would say it's absolutely wide open. And the range of things I've seen from my students, from music theatre through to some really quite abstruse serialist compositions, through to jazz-inflected pieces, I've seen a massive variety, and it's been great to see them develop their own language, actually.
Thank you. So we've got a couple of questions about personal statements. So the first one, in a general personal statement, the recommendation is that only a small proportion covers co-curricular activities. For music, is it expected that we include more of this to show wider interest? Sam, yes, do you want to
go? Okay. Well, what people, because of the Cambridge college system, I would say it's fair to say there isn't one expectation about what we're going to read in your personal statements, because they're being read by so many different people, which I think is an advantage. With that said, my general advice, and it may have already come up, Delphine may have mentioned this already in another context, I'm not sure, but it's very easy for musicians to simply list their activities because we're so engaged in activities. I've done this concert, I played this piece, I won this award, or I put together this band. That's fantastic, but I'm always interested to see something personal in there about what interests people, what they've followed up, what they've done for themselves. Now that can be within music. If it's there as a co-curricular thing, absolutely fine. I'm interested in that as well, because so many things, of course, feed into the curriculum. So music is a very porous subject, and it draws on skills that people have developed, whether they're language skills, whether they're numeric skills, increasingly now through music and science. Almost anything really can play into the music tripos and is represented there somewhere. So I'm always interested to see it, but less as a list of activities and more as a series of things that candidate is interested in and has followed up for themselves.
And I think it's important to add there too, that you don't have to have sung with lots of choirs or played in lots of orchestras or been in NYO and so on. Not all students express their musical interests through performing in lots of groups or don't have that opportunity to do so. And so that's not a crucial factor. Although, as Sam says, it's interesting to us if you have done these things, and we will look at everything in context and sort of the bigger picture, but it's not the most important thing. Related to that, there's another question here. On a personal statement, would the university prefer to see a wide range of musical interests or fewer interests explored in greater detail?
That's a kind of how long is a piece of string question, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, you know, it seems to me that there is such diversity within the Cambridge course that actually it's able to cater for both of those extremes. It's able to cater for those people who really want to go deeply into a very particular area or set of cognate areas. And it's also very good for those people who really do want to explore and to range very widely. And I think it would be perverse for us to try and prioritize one or other of that kind of shape of student, if you'll pardon the expression, coming in, given that we have a course that enables both of those shapes of student coming out. I think the most important thing is that, you know, you show the level of engagement that you have with either the breadth or the depth. And if you can find a way to connect the two, all the better.
Thank you, Catherine. So we have a different question here on what arrangements are there with instrumental lessons and how are they managed? It's one for you, Sam, I think.
Okay. So we have a director of performance in the faculty, Maggie Faultless, who's there to advise all students who are taking performance through the Tripos. And she's certainly always willing to have conversations with students to provide not only the normal faculty classes, but also to help them decide about what directions they want to go, and possibly also teachers. With that said, the decision about who a student wishes to study with really does rest ultimately with the student. So if you have an existing teacher that you wish to study with, that is absolutely fine. You may end up having a conversation with the director of studies about that as well, to say, well, have you thought about other possibilities? Where do you want to go? But ultimately, it will be a student decision about who they have lessons with. Many of our students go down to London to have their lessons, but equally there are many visiting instrumental teachers to Cambridge, and there will certainly be enough if you haven't got a particular teacher in mind, to a very high level. And capable of teaching to the Tripos level and way beyond, who come and visit Cambridge. So that there is choice involved here. And of course, then there is guaranteed support for instrumental lessons for anybody taking it as part of the Tripos, £420 in the first year, £540 in the second, I think up to £700 in the third year. And that is absolutely guaranteed if you're taking a performance option. And then beyond that, even if you decide ultimately, well, I don't want to take a performance option or want to do some other things, there is still then college support for music lessons, usually up to a certain proportion of the cost of those lessons.
Thank you. And there is another performance webinar happening tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, where all questions, particularly relating to performance, not just for those thinking of studying music, but anyone in the university who's interested in making music and all the opportunities available for that. That will be a very good place to ask your questions about all things performance related. Okay, so we've got a couple more questions about interviews. So first one here is, who will be at a music interview? Well, Catherine, do you want to?
Yes, yes. I mean, it will be members of staff from the college. And if the college has just one member of staff in music, then that college might request a colleague from another college. It's like, in terms of the subject interview, it is likely to be 2 people who interview you. And, you know, the interview could take many forms, but it's likely to address the historical parts of the course, some of the practical parts of the course, and, you know, partly a general conversation based around your personal statement to try and tease out some of the things that you've said you're particularly interested in, and just to push those further in an intellectual, as part of an intellectual conversation, to see, you know, how you respond to people who just want to perhaps push against what you've said and encourage you to perhaps rethink, or encourage you to present your argument in a different way, or to justify it or defend it in a different way, and just to begin that kind of supervision conversation within the structure of an interview.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'll just add a couple of things to that. So ordinarily, every student who is invited to interview will have 2 interviews. Very often it will be 2 what we call subject interviews, which are run by academic music tutors. Sometimes there'll be 1 subject interview and what we call a general interview, which will be run by often an admissions tutor. So there is a little bit of variation. It's one of the wonderful things about Cambridge, I think, that there is so much variety and sort of individuality, but it can be a little bit confusing because it's not exactly the same at every college. So it's always worth checking the web pages on the university. There's a link on our music faculty website. If you go to the section for prospective students and applying to study music, you can find there a list of all of the colleges. And if you click on those links, it will take you to the music page for that college, which will list all the details about how the interviews are run at that college, and what to expect of those interviews. So there is a little bit of variety, but we are all really looking for the same things, which is students who are really passionate about studying music and who are going to most benefit from the courses that we have here. So just to bear in mind, there is that sort of variety across the colleges. But what will also happen at every college is that the interviews are overseen by the Director of Studies at that college. And so it's also a good idea sometimes to get in touch with the Director of Studies in Music at the college that you're interested in applying to, and they'll be able to give you further details about the process at their college. Okay. So we have a few more questions here. What connections does Cambridge have with the film music industry, and what do people specializing in film music do straight after university? I think
well, one of them writes the score to The Death of Stalin.
Yeah, so we do have a few students who've studied here at Cambridge who've gone on to work in the film music industry. So as Catherine says, one of our former students, Chris Willis, most recently scored the David Copperfield film that came out recently, and before that, Death of Stalin. And we also, I think, I've forgotten his name now, but the composer who did the score for Gravity, so Academy Award-winning score, studied at Cambridge. In terms of other connections, well, we do offer film scoring as an option as part of our course, and that's taught by a film composer who is based, I think, at the Royal College.
Royal College, Michael Ladouceur, yeah.
And so that's a very popular option, I think, for quite a few of our students, including Cheryl, I think, who's taken that course. Yeah. Okay, someone's saying that Chris Willis is one of their favorite composers. Well, that's
great.
Okay, so a few more questions coming up here. So if a candidate wants to talk about 20th century jazz as well as popular music in an interview rather than Western classical tradition, would that put them at a disadvantage? Well, absolutely not. But would either of you like to comment on that a little further? I mean, I think no.
Well, perhaps I should go first. Well, of course, because I have interests, I have regularly done this with candidates and I can have just as interesting a conversation and judge their interests and skills when I'm talking about jazz as other topics. However, even as somebody with a jazz specialist interest, I'm also looking for students who'd have a wider interest than that to talk about in interview. If I have a jazz student, for example, we may talk about jazz for a bit, but we'll certainly get on to other topics as well. So I think it's certainly yes. And I've also I have to say, conducted interviews as the second person with other of my colleagues who've had very good discussions about jazz and popular music with candidates. So it's not just about people with specialisms in those areas, but then they've gone on to other topics as well. These interviews can be quite free-flowing, and that's one of their benefits.
Thank you. Okay, another question here. So just going back up the list here. Are there any tips for music interview preparations, and how long is the harmony exam? Well, I think we've talked a little bit about preparing for interviews. In terms of a harmony, I'm not sure if this question is referring to harmony exams as part of the interview process, in which case that can vary. As I said, the interview process can vary from college to college. Not every college will have a harmony test or harmony exam, and the length of time that is given for that test, if there is one, will vary a bit from college to college. So I know Pembroke does have a harmony test, and I think that lasts about an hour, is that right?
That's right, yeah. Ours lasts an hour. But I should stress that even as one of the colleges that does have a test, it's there as using it as a basis. It's not to judge where you've got to at the moment that you're applying. It's used as a basis for seeing, well, let's see how far you can go. So a student who does the harmony test can usually expect it to reappear in the discussion, and it's at that moment where we see, well, look, let's see how quickly you can take on new ideas and respond to ideas about the work that you've done. And that's the crucial thing.
And the same can be said of any of the tests. So yeah, keyboard test or oral tests, if they take place at a college, exactly how long they last will vary a little bit, and it's just one small component in a much wider ranging process to try and gauge a candidate's strengths and potential for the course.
And just to add to that, it's really important, I think, that if within the interview it becomes clear that you've made mistakes, this is not a deal breaker. The fact that you've made mistakes or the fact that something might be improved is actually a catalyst to discussion. And, you know, it's, as Sam says, it's what happens next. So, you know, don't get that dreadful sinking feeling, thinking I've just committed all the errors known to harmony and I'm sunk, because it is really how you dig yourself out of that hole and how you end up with a conversation to get to a better solution that is the thing that the interviewer is going to hang on to. So it just means that at that point you don't get dispirited and you don't get mad, you get even.
And that's true of all aspects of the interview as well, that we're often looking for a kind of flexibility of thought and willingness to take on new ideas and try things out. You don't have to know everything before you start. If you did, then we'd have very little to do. Okay. There's another question that, let me find it again. So is there a place where we can discuss with current music students about our interests in order to widen our thinking? I'm not sure that we do or can offer that at the moment. Cheryl, you might have a few ideas about that. I'm not sure.
I'm not aware of there being a discussion platform where you can just actively talk to current music students.
No, I think the thing would probably be to look out for any, particularly any open days that we are able to hold, whether sort of particularly online open days. We're going to try and hold a taster day a little bit later in the summer, which would be an opportunity to engage in more discussion, to have a look at our resources pages as well, and some of the suggestions for further study and activities that provide a kind of starting point for trying to expand some of your current thinking about music. And just as we've already said, it doesn't really matter what you read, what you listen to, as long as you're thinking about it. But sometimes it's helpful to have a guide at the start. And so our resources page will hopefully offer that as a starting point. Okay. We're slowly drawing to the end of our time. I wonder, Cheryl, if you could perhaps briefly just reflect on what you've most enjoyed about the Cambridge Music degree in your time here.
I think it's the opportunity to go really in depth about something that you like and be able to have these discussions with an expert in your field, because I don't think there are many opportunities to do that. And just to be able to have this really open and frank conversation with your supervisor, focusing on an area that you both are really interested in. And I think that's one of the biggest merits of the Cambridge Music course.
And I think I'll say this as someone who teaches and is also involved in interviewing, that it's a wonderful thing for us too to be able to talk to so many students who are so passionate about the subject and all bring their own interests and ideas to us and to the course. I certainly learn a lot from them throughout their time here in the degree, and I think it's just a wonderful thing about the Cambridge teaching system that allows us to really get to know our students and to work with them very closely. We do have one final question that has come in just before we close. Do you have to do composition modules throughout the 3 years, or can you choose to focus on other areas of study instead?
The answer is no, you don't. You have to do composition right the way from the beginning. Composition isn't one of the options, or will be one of the options in the new Tripos. So it's there for people who want it, and it's there alongside performance, which we haven't previously been able to do for those people who want it. But if you want to steer away from composition, you can do that too.
Okay, thank you. And there was one last question about any book or documentaries that you'd recommend. Again, if you look on our resources page, we do have some recommended reading and lectures as well that you can watch. So I would encourage you to look at that page, and I'll pop a link to that just below the text on this video. And one last question, will the performance webinar be available to watch afterwards? They are being recorded, and we will put a version of those webinars up at the end of the week. Okay, so our time is up. Thank you all for your questions. And if you find you have any more questions, join us again tomorrow. So we'll be here at 2 o'clock. And you're also very welcome to email us at any time at outreach@mus.cam.ac.uk, and we'll try to answer your questions. But for now, thank you and enjoy the rest of the open days.